Guys, before getting this reaction started, I just want to say shout out to GM_KA for recommending this reaction. And let's get straight into the reaction. Back to a brand new reaction, and today I hope you brought your popcorn because this reaction is going to be a little under an hour long. It's like 53 minutes and 33 seconds. So, yeah. Hope you guys got your popcorn or whatever you guys may while watching these videos. I'm not too sure, but anyway, let's get straight into the reaction. This is FNaF's most controversial theory. It just came true, Secret of the Mimic. This was made last year on June 29th. And yeah, let's get straight into the reaction.
Of course not. Nothing in this franchise is ever an accident. Take a look at Gregory here. Notice anything familiar? Dark eyes, brown hair with a piece falling between his eyes, shorts, a shirt with 2 stripes across the middle. Ladies and gentlemen, Gregory is none other than the crying child. Don't believe me?
Wow, I can't believe Mappa and Tom were so stupid. Ah, fuck.
Yeah. Like, oh,
Scott,
shit.
What are you trying to say? Why have you put this in your
Holy
game?
fez
Matt
shit.
called this imagery out once and we all laughed at him for it, but now it's back. Again, a kid with dark hair and a dark shirt with stripes. He's sitting under a
We've
tree
seen
on a
this
hill next to an
image
animatronic.
like 3 times now. Once in Security Breach, once in Security Breach Ruin, and now in Secret
He's
of the Mimic.
unmistakably supposed to evoke the image of these two, even to the point where they're both carrying their favorite plushies. But this isn't Gregory or the crying child, it's someone new, David Murray. I'll be honest, this doesn't feel like a coincidence anymore. I can accept this imagery once as simply paying homage to an old character, but now, again, with another kid, things are getting a little weird. So I started digging, because I wanted to see if our new friend David Murray actually connected to the crying child or Gregory in any...
For the record, this is actually the actual design for David in the books. Thanks, we now know that thanks to the graphic novel that came out recently.
Meaningful way, and I hate what I found. By the end of this video, I'll tell you what the Secret of the Mimic actually is, and why these characters might be more connected than MatPat and Tom ever could have realized. One of the main criticisms of MatPat's original theory, the idea that Gregory is somehow the crying child, is that it relied pretty heavily on visual similarities. Clothing, hair, and that sort of thing.
And more often than not, that robot theory gets boiled down to this singular graphic right here. So much so that we actually started to meme on it ourselves.
But now, with the introduction of David Murray, we've got to revisit his line of thinking. Because this time, we have a lot more than appearance. We also have shared personality, dynamics, and themes. There's way more substance to this connection. And just to clarify up front, no.
I can name a couple just off the top of my head. What he just explained earlier with the striped shirt and brown hair and the basically the body type main stuff. And number 2, David walked around with a white tiger plush. So did the crying child with the Fredbear plush. And to be honest, Gregory just walks around with a lot of Security Breach plushes, so...
I do not think Gregory or the crying child are literal robots. I think they're human, but we'll come back to that. The first thing I set out to do was find all the connections between David Murray and Gregory. Back to the first image I showed, this shot of...
I mean, thanks to the novel trilogy, we do know that human type animatronics are a thing now in Five Nights at Freddy's.
Security Breach shows Gregory and Glamrock
We
Freddy
literally see them
sitting
inside
on a hill
of
under a
more
tree.
recent.
Now, This
Sorry,
is
we
the
literally
same
see a couple of
exact
them
hill
within like the more recent books.
we see David and Fiona sitting on. We know that the grounds of Murray's costume manor sitting on a hill under a tree. Now, this is the same exact hill we see David
Yeah.
and Fiona sitting on. We know that the grounds of
Which-
Murray's costume manor will later be used as the grounds for the Pizzaplex. So it's interesting that these two are literally
camera just
sitting
seems
in
like,
the same spot. Go up to that house.
Rotated?
You see how one of those trees on the left is modeled differently than all the others with the swing set on it, swing set tire?
Yeah, that is interesting.
Go up to that tree. Go up to that tree.
Shout out to Rytoast and T-Dreads. T-Dreads for this original video, but Rytoast being featured in it, by the way.
Turn around.
Oh, don't tell
What
me it's...
screenshot is that? Yep, this is original. So, you know that
Oh,
image of
'cause
David
the
Murray
image
and the
is
mimic? Yes.
wrong.
We don't see the Pizzaplex here because the image is flipped. David and Fiona are looking
Yeah.
at the factory, while Gregory and Freddy are looking away from it, looking forward. Then, obviously, he looks like David. He's rocking the same fit with the same pose and the same hair.
Oh, I just
Nothing.
thought it was the same
But the
image,
meat
but
and
reverted
potatoes
and
is what we
changed a
learn
little bit.
about Gregory. Most of his backstory comes from the Patient 46 therapy tapes. Keep in mind that these are the most important lore
And of
collectible
course,
in
the
Security
lighting
Breach.
was changed.
They're one of the last things you usually collect, and each has only a minute or two to deliver its information, so there isn't much time to waste. The connections to David Murray found in these present themselves in some very telling ways. I think you'll catch on to what I think is happening pretty soon. One of the first comments made to Gregory here is,
When the shade's pulled, it feels like we're in a cubbyhole or a cave.
now, back then, this comment seemed like a really weird detail to emphasize in tapes that were clearly insanely lore relevant. But that's because we didn't know David's story yet. In Secret of the Mimic, David Murray has a little cubby area set up. Potential God
Oh yeah,
David
he
incoming.
does. I forgot about that.
And the cave is one of the most important areas.
And I didn't even think about the cave inside of the Moon.exe minigame.
In Moon.exe,
Yep.
where the statue of the baby owl representing
David.
David resides. We know that Gregory, too, in the same room with the Balloon World arcade machine, more about that machine later, sets up a cubbyhole of his own. The Patient 46 tapes then take a mysterious turn when the therapist brings up a tragic history involving Gregory's parents.
Well, I'd like to start by talking about your parents. What happened to them? And you? It was tragic.
But it's later revealed that the story Gregory gives here is a complete lie. The therapist herself notes something odd about the way Gregory talks about it. She says it's as if he's pulling his memories out of a book, rather than actually recalling them as his own and processing them in a subjective, emotional way.
But when I looked through the notes, I didn't get a sense that you've processed that emotionally. When I read your account of what happened, it came across as, well, more of an objective rather than a subjective narrative. Oh, sorry. You don't know what that means, do you?
Probably
What I
'cause
mean
they're-
is that the way
well,
you tell
they're
the story
able to
is
hack
more
and
like
stuff,
you
so they
were
can't-
reading something from
so
a
they can't
book
be, like-
than you were talking about your own past.
Subjective, objective, like he's simply pulling memories from a data set. This is exactly how an AI would be described to recall
maybe a
and relay
robot
information,
child
and it's not helped by the
per se.
fact that the therapist uses the metaphor of a book for this, much like how we soothe David from within the Mimic AI.
The storyteller
using a
ending, yeah.
storybook reminding him of his past memories. Also, yes,
Like,
I
aka
am
the
aware
night-
that memory
like the
suppression
night,
or detachment are real things. I'm not saying that people that
The
have these
bedtime-
coping
like the
mechanisms
bedtime
are
story
robots.
ending.
Next, the therapist presses
Basically,
further,
it's like
stating
a-
that Gregory is creating fantasies.
So, if you could process those feelings, how do you think it would affect your fantasies?
Gregory, speaking to the therapist here, is inventing fantasies, inventing memories from his past that don't line up with the documented past of Gregory, the human boy. These are stories he's relaying that he likely believes, but which don't actually come from his life. He's able to recall these false memories with ease. The therapist doesn't think he's lying. He's coming up with these easily. That's why they're described as fantasies here, rather than as an attempt to mislead the therapist. It's almost like Gregory is remembering and telling the story of somebody else's life. One of the next tapes presents some different information that still helps us in theory crafting. Gregory's being asked a string of opinion-based questions. Simple stuff about sports or whether he likes going outside,
Well, he's homeless,
but he
so...
doesn't answer.
How do you spend all the time you have? Nothing. Well, how do you feel about sports? You like sports? Yeah? No? Oh, I get it. You like to watch them, but not play them.
And I think this isn't because he's being difficult, but because there's nothing there. His lack of communication here, to me at least, reads like an
I just don't
empty
like...
husk
Me,
at
personally, I
times,
just don't
rather
like
than
sports
a
in
liar.
general.
At this time, for some reason, Gregory doesn't have developed preferences or opinions on some things. Something is wrong
There was
with him,
one sport I like,
and the
though, it's
therapists can
baseball.
tell. Next up, the therapist describes
Other than that, I
Gregory
don't
as
really like
somebody that
that
doesn't
many
have
sports.
any friends, as a loner. A strange thing for her to think, because we know that he does have a friend in Cassie. So for whatever reason, at this time, he's being antisocial or doesn't know how to make friends. Something that, as we see in the games, but mostly...
that would line up with David Murray since Edwin kept him cooped up inside of a factory basically his whole entire life.
In the story, the mimic,
Till his death.
David, couldn't do either. He pretty much never left the factory, never went to school, and never interacted with anybody outside of babysitters and his parents. So again, here the therapist is describing a character trait which doesn't line up with Gregory's past, but which does line up with David Murray's. Weird. The therapist then goes on a massive tangent about how Gregory has developed a program to ask himself questions, get answers, and repeat phrases back to him.
Mimic
So it's a
phrases.
program
That's
that
weird how
answers
he
questions
emphasis mimic like that.
and mimics phrases.
I saw in your file that you have developed software programs that talk to you in repeat phrases, right? The program asks you questions and prompts you for responses. It's kind of like your own self-therapy, isn't it? Another way of talking to yourself to work things out, right?
It's later described by the therapist that this seems like self-therapy to her. The thing is asking about Gregory from within himself and getting answers from within his own mind. It's really bizarre, and the way the therapist describes it confuses me to this day, but the important revelation is in this clip.
When I saw some of your recent encrypted conversation logs, that's what I thought I was looking at. It felt like I was watching someone go back and forth in their own head. But the text found something that's different than that. When I read what they found, at first, I thought I was looking at more examples of you just talking with yourself. Then I realized it was different. When I study this, it sounds like there is someone else responding to you. Who is it?
There's somebody else responding. The language used here is very interesting. In Vanessa's tapes, for example, it's clear from the get-go that she's talking to a separate person, being manipulated, and doing out-of-character things.
But a routine check of your online history has revealed that you've spent quite a bit of time with someone in an encrypted conversation. We have transcripts, and I've read them. But it's not clear what you're talking about in these conversations. I can't make sense of it. You must be getting something from these that I'm not getting, right?
With Gregory, however, the therapist confuses the conversation as being self-talk, almost as though the thing that Gregory is speaking to could easily be mistaken for him. By this point, I'd become quite confident in this. Gregory isn't just confused or lying to the therapist. He's being influenced by something. And if the Frights and Tales books were meant to give us any information at all as to where Scott was taking the plot, it's likely that he's sharing his brain with another mind. That's why we have all these false memories, and why the therapist confuses this as self-therapy, a self-dialogue from within his own head.
Fucking mosquito.
So, who exactly is in Gregory's head?
Fucking mosquito, dude.
Well,
Get
the
away
next
from
Patient
me.
46 tape seals the deal. During an ink blot test,
Snack it
Gregory
off.
sees a mask, and the therapist launches into a paragraph about how masks are useful for disguises. She asks Gregory directly.
You think it's a mask? It reminds you of a mask? Like a disguise? Yeah, I can see that. You like the idea of being disguised? Disguises let you be sort of invisible, don't they? You can get away with almost anything when you're invisible, can't you? Yeah, you like that idea, huh?
She notes that masks allow you to hide, to get away with things you otherwise
Being the
couldn't
mimic.
pull off. And then it clicked. In Moon.exe, you literally use a mask to sneak out the window without getting caught, to get away with running from our father, Moon, when we otherwise couldn't have. And in Secret of the Mimic, David, mixed with the Mimic AI, is constantly hopping into different disguises, wearing different masks. This isn't just symbolic. I believe that the branch of the Mimic AI that is mixed with David Murray, M2, has made its way into Gregory's mind. The tapes round out with another twist.
Oh,
The
into
therapist
his
says that
mind.
patient 46
Damn,
has been
okay.
seen with a
But
glitchy,
how is that possible?
rabbit-looking figure,
Because
which sounds like Vanny at first, but listen to how the therapist describes it.
because
They say
M2
you're in
is an
communication
endoskeleton,
with
not the program.
or maybe something. I have this still shot the text pulled from
That's
the
M1,
security
that's the
footage
program.
that recorded you in the Pizzaplex. That's you, isn't it? I know this image is distorted, but I think it looks like you. And you're not alone here. You're talking to someone. Or something. It's hard to tell. What are those things? They almost look like rabbit ears.
That wording is strange if it's meant to just be a person.
Rabbit
But
ears?
it would line up
You mean like
with what we now know to be
Vanny mask?
Nexus. If M2 has made its way into Gregory, say through a chip in his head, it would make sense for the AI version of David to be interacting with the cradle.
Hey everyone, T-Dread forgot to do a recap segment to explain to you what the hell he's talking about when he brings up stuff like the Cradle and Mexus, so being the lazy piece of shit he is, he made me do the recap segment. I mean, we all know how good I am at those, so why not? Let's try it. To begin with, what is the Cradle and what is its purpose? Secret of the Mimic introduced us to the origins of the Mexus machine from Ruin. In Ruin,
basically
Mexus
the
machine
cradle
is
was a AI machine to prevent the mimic from doing any harm to anyone else.
augmented reality computer meant to keep the Mimic locked in the basement
Yeah.
under the Pizzaplex. And when Cassie disables it, it can roam free and attempt to escape in that DLC's ending.
Except it was
But we found
recall
out that
and
Mexus, or at least
yeah.
the blue AR rabbit part
Cra-
of it,
Cradle
has
is
its
tough.
origins in
It's
something
that
called
is
the Cradle. In case
ano-
you want the full
another
breakdown
term
of
for
the
the
game's lore
Mexus.
to better understand what I'm talking about, go watch my video on the subject or just wait for T-Dreads when it releases in like 6 months from now. Anyway, here's the log the F10N4 computer sends Edwin explaining what the Cradle does. Edwin, please talk to me. We need to stop it together. Here are the blueprints for a Cradle. It can help keep David safe and provide boundaries. It's a type of computer and it's bigger than anything you've done before. If you won't finish the program, consider building the Cradle. It will keep people safe. Now, if you're familiar with the lore of Secret of the Mimic, you'll know that this log isn't just about protecting David. Later on, it's about protecting the M2
everyone.
Mimic who's pretending to be David through this Cradle. In fact, we see the origin of the Cradle, the F10N4 computer, in Secret of the Mimic's parachute ending. Wait a minute, are you still watching?
yes.
Oh, right, this is T-Dread's audience. They need, like, visual stimulation. Anyway, the Cradle
Oh my
transports Pizza Box in
God.
the future and is used as the Nexus machine.
Oh my
Tools need to protect and
god.
create boundaries for the Mimic.
The freaking
Defense uses tech to trap the Mimic in the
the
basement.
freaking
Cradle
avoid
flies
surfers on the side of
This
the
is how Gregory
screen.
starts talking to it, as one of the therapy tapes shows
Oh
us.
my god.
Okay, am I done? Can I go to sleep? Okay, cool.
Dude, I am not one of those.
TD,
Alright,
next time you forget to do a recap segment,
relax.
That's on you, buddy.
I'm
Go
21.
subscribe to me or something.
I'm Gen
Therapy
Z,
tapes
okay?
Our ultimate lore collectible, remember? end with the revelation that the tragic backstory Patient 46 gave,
Jesus
the one about
Christ.
the tragic incident with their family, doesn't match up with the records of the real Gregory's documented past. Guess what exactly Gregory was lying about?
All that stuff about your parents? None of what you said in your file about your parents was true. You had great parents.
Gregory claims specifically that he had a bad relationship with his parents. That leaves us with one question. If these stories don't belong to Gregory, who do they belong to? Well, like everything so far, this fits with David Murray, who had a bad relationship with his parents, always leaving him with babysitters or spending all their time on work. David Murray is tied to the cave. David Murray is tied first to cubbyholes. David Murray at this point would think like an AI pulling memories out of a book, objectively. David Murray would have been too young to form opinions on many things.
Yeah, to be fair, my parents aren't that great either. My mom is way better than my dad, don't get me wrong. My dad was literally never there for me whenever I needed it. And my mom tries her best. So
David Murray was always in the manor and factory and had no real friends, was a loner. If David Murray was assimilating with Gregory and communicating to him as another consciousness from within his own mind, a plot element that Scott has used many times before, it would appear to the therapist as self-dialogue. David Murray is
we have
associated with
tons
climbing into
of bad
disguises
parents
and
inside
wearing
these
masks to
books.
get away with things he otherwise couldn't have. And David Murray is more likely than anyone else to be interacting with the cradle. And on top of all that, they look the same. Someone or something is trying to make Gregory the next David. The nail in the coffin? Balloon World, as I mentioned earlier. A random
Balloon
arcade game thrown into
World?
Gregory's hideout in the daycare. Let's talk. See this? That's Sun.
Yep.
Sun, without a doubt, represents Fiona, David's mother, just as Moon represents Edwin, his father. I want you to listen to how Scott Cawthon describes the way he instructed Steelwool to leave Lore.
And I had a specific
Oh, this is
story
from
for this
Dawko's
for
interview.
security breach. I really did. I had a very specific story in mind, and it is very different.
No, it's 2
than what
years
you got
ago.
in the game.
It was 2
And I
years
think
ago.
a part of that is the way that I conveyed that to Steel Wool, because what I was trying to
Well, that's
do
crazy to
was
think
I
that
was
this was
trying
2
to
years
tell
ago.
Steel Wool to do specific things throughout the game, put specific items in specific places, have specific characters do certain things. Meanwhile, not telling them what the story plot was, because in my head, I was thinking, okay, when people find this, they will connect this to this to this, and it will all be revealed.
Now then, going to Secret of the Mimic.
That's
we can
fair,
all agree
honestly.
that Fiona is Mrs. Helpful, right?
I
She
mean,
is literally the voice
if
of it.
you guys don't know, or if you guys don't recall, way back in the day, there were people going in the files of the games to find lore. I'm not joking.
Well, I want you to listen to the very first thing Fiona says, paired with the very first thing that Sun does.
A death-defying dive!
A death-defying dive? Stretching it? No. Sun is also the head of arts and crafts in Help Wanted 2. Fiona was the artist and graphic designer for MCM.
That's
Sun
fair.
asks Gregory,
Don't you want a puppet show?
and Fiona designed puppets for David. In the Endo Warehouse minigame, where you are literally programming memories into an endoskeleton to teach it how
Oh
to be a
god, I
convincing human
hated this
child,
one.
one
I
of those
hated this
pairings
one
is
so
kicking
much.
a rubber ball and having
I
a
hated this
Band-Aid
one.
on your
I
knee.
hated it.
And it's Sun that pops up and smiles when you're pairing the correct memories and teaching this AI
Well,
how
yeah,
to act like
Sun
a
is
real
the joyful
kid. Just
one.
like how I smile when
Meanwhile,
you hit like
Moon
and
is
subscribe, so this gets
the
pushed
one
to
trying
the
to put
algorithm
kids to
and
sleep
I make
permanently.
money. Now, like I said, I think Sun represents Fiona because of all that. I don't think she's literally in there, at least I hope not, but in Sun's
That would be a
room,
digital
we
hell.
play Balloon World, where we enter a glitch to help us get further into the game, as Sun looms over us the whole time. When we enter the glitch, the demonic face of Eclipse appears. Now, if Sun is Fiona, then Eclipse is certainly meant to represent David. And when Gregory, hiding out in the
That's
home
fair,
of Fiona,
honestly, because
David's mother,
the
completes this
sun
game.
and the moon, when a sun and moon collide, it makes an eclipse. When a mother and a father, when a mother and father do the deed, comes out a child.
The face of Eclipse comes up to the screen, dwarfing you, and says good night.
And the kid is a mixture of the parent, which is what David is.
Consciousness of David Murray
Or
pushing
was.
Gregory into the background through a game. Just like Glitchtrap did with Vanessa in Help Wanted. So there you go. Gregory is meant to be the next David, and that makes sense because of all those connections that relate to David, because of Sun representing Fiona, and because, well, we know the Mimic storyline is part of the Security Breach era because the Mimic is in the game. But notice how I said the next and not the second. Well, that's because we still have one dark-haired boy with a white striped shirt and a band-aid on his knee and a tendency to carry his favorite plush everywhere. And I'd be letting game theory down if I didn't tell you how the crying child is also another David. Let's start with the basics. In the new Game Plus ending of Secret of the Mimic,
This is pain
Fiona,
for him
David's
to cover.
robot
This is
mother,
pain and suffering.
sends you up to the old manor to ask Edwin to fix their family. And with the glitch permission unlocked, you're able to do just that to her son, named Dave. Where do we do this? A bedroom. One with a familiar layout and familiar toys.
Yeah, that when I saw this for the first time, I was like, okay, this is literally the FNaF 4 bedroom. Yeah, this is.
Basis for a room we all recognize.
Yep.
Thanks to the in-game emails and the timeline established in Curse of Dreadbear, we know this house that we're in, and that has this bedroom, is eventually repossessed by William Afton.
Yep.
And rebuilt
I
by
was going to say Fazbear
1983.
Entertainment, but William Afton makes
This
sense.
bedroom, it becomes the crying child's bedroom. Now, how do we fix David? Well, we guide him through positive, happy memories. Listen to the wording here.
Do you remember how our story begins?
We use this memory, placing ourselves in the roles of friends of the Freddy's characters, to remind this child named Dave, who lives in the FNaF 4 house, of a happy memory, and he is then made whole, signaled through an achievement with the description, fix what is broken. Language also used on Gregory. I think that starts right now, right?
I feel you are broken.
Yep.
Don't worry about
And the crying child.
Yeah.
You're broken. We are still your friends.
Already we have way more than just a visual similarity. We have two children, both seemingly named David, connected to the same property, the same bedroom, the same toys, and the same Freddy's character-themed memories used to put them back together. And those are just connections from a surface-level glance at one ending of one game. So the question becomes, if this much connects on the surface, what happens when we go another layer deep? I did a live stream recently where some friends and I went through all their appearances and jotted down the similarities between Dave Murray and Dave Afton. Here's just a few of them.
Oh my God!
Both have dark hair, a striped shirt, both carry a stuffed animal everywhere, that's seen with Tiger Rock, and then with psychic friend Fredbear, who he holds in his arms in this drawing. They have the literal same house. They have the literal same toys.
Yeah,
they
that's
both have
fair.
a neglectful father who's always working. They're both named Dave. They both end up being presented as mascots.
Except debatably, Actually, not debatably. William Afton is factually a worse father.
Suits that teleport and cause hallucinations. First, David Murray with Tiger Rock, who downstairs teleports, causes hallucinations, and then Dave Afton, who, as Golden Freddy, teleports and causes hallucinations. They're both afraid of metal endoskeletons. We know that because David Murray says this.
Why does it look like that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
And the crying child is scared to death when he's in the back room. They both have no real friends and are loners, since we know David never really leaves the factory, and David Afton only has plushies for friends. Speaking of which, both have a close relationship to the FNaF characters. Both are scared of Foxy's pirate crew. First, we see the crying child scared out of his mind when he gets jump scared by the Foxy brother, and Fiona makes a Roxanne doll, right, part of Foxy's crew, which scares the hell out of David.
Yeah.
They both die on their birthday in an accident. They both have no mother at home and are left with a babysitter. On top of all those, which are objective similarities, there's something else worth noting.
Is
around the release of
Michael.
Ruin, the first time we see the Mimic in the games, Steelwool started posting a series of Guess the Sketch images,
Yeah.
but one stood out. A sketch of the crying child from Five Nights at Freddy's 4. The crying child, who we know has a ton of narrative significance, but who hasn't really been actively referenced in years. This tells us something important. Steelwool was thinking about the crying child at the exact time they were actively writing the Mimic story. So now, I had the motivation to go back and re-examine every appearance of the crying child, and the connections between him and David Murray just became harder and harder to ignore. What I found are more objective, clearly repeated motifs between David Murray and the crying child. So let's keep walking through them one by one. The crying child's first appearance is in FNaF 4,
Yeah.
and instantly the game opens with a detail that until now seemed absolutely irrelevant. The crying child is trapped in his bedroom. The door is locked from the other side. In other words, barred from the other side. That same phrase, barred from the other side, is used to describe how the player of Moon.exe, who represents David in one way or another, is locked in their bedroom. Alright, next. The house in these FNaF 4 minigames seems clearly different from the one Afton later rebuilds on the hill, but still, there's weird similarities. There's a grandfather clock in the hallway, like the one we'll later see in Edwin's version of the house, and we'll see a flower poster on the wall with 5 petals in this room and in Moon.exe. For those who believe Midnight Motorist is about the Aftons, in that minigame, somebody runs away out the window, escaping their father. And in Moon.exe, we run out the window, escaping our father. Side note, let's talk about everyone's favorite character, Pigtail Girl. She tells the crying child that people's bodies get stuffed into suits at night. Something that never made sense to be a rumor in 1983 when FNaF 4 is set. Because, you know, we all believe the MCI to happen in 1985. But now, with Secret of the Mimic, we have a new possibility. Murray's costume manor, the one David Murray's story revolves around, has 12 entire teams of workers go missing, later found stuffed into suits. That rumor Pigtail Girl repeats would make sense to be happening now in 1983 if that incident had happened in the 1970s. So now we have all this imagery and the timeline lining these two games up suspiciously well. Obviously, as I alluded to earlier, a huge similarity lies in the language used during both David Murray and the Crying Child's arcs. In FNaF 4, the Crying Child is told that he's broken, that he needs to be fixed, and that he'll eventually be put back together. These are phrases that confused the fandom for years, but now compare that to Secret of the Mimic. Fiona uses identical language when talking about her son. She wants Edwin to fix their family.
It's not too late to fix our family.
The final ending is centered on helping David recover his good memories and fixing what is broken. Even the way this putting back together starts is similar. In FNaF 4, the Crying Child hears these comforting phrases through his Fredbear doll, a Freddy's character who is presented as one of CC's friends. And in The Happiest Day, we're put into a different version of that terrible birthday party memory, where Freddy's characters, his friends, show up. Now, in the storybook ending of Secret of the Mimic, Fiona reads off a story involving the Freddy's gang.
Yeah, that's
designed to help David
it's definitely like Freddy's gang.
show
Yeah.
up. Now, in the storybook ending of Secret...
Because as you can see here, there's a bear, Freddy, Bunny, Bonnie, Chicken, Chica, Fox, Foxy, Gator, Monty, and a dog, Sparky.
The
Or
Mimic,
Bub, if you want to get technical, but...
Fiona reads off a story.
And do not say that Monty is not a part of the original band, because he came even before freaking Freddy. So shut up.
Involving the Freddy's gang, designed to help David Murray remember something important. Both kids get their feeling of comfort and rest in a memory told through the lens of being friends with the Freddy's characters.
Canonally, he
And
came
both
before
involve a
freaking
calming
Freddy,
voice
so
guiding that child.
I don't want to hear it in the
using
comics.
same language. But why? Why is this a pattern? I've told this to so many of my FNaF tuber friends, all these connections, and many of them say that they're just parallels. They're just connections to be cool. And I couldn't think of too great of a comeback to that. So I went outside, and I walked up the hill, and I talked to the wise elder Unwithered Tree. Tell me, Unwithered Tree, tell me about parallel!
The unwithered tree. Oh my god.
Here to tell you all about what a parallel really is in storytelling. The word parallel is thrown around a lot in the FNaF community, but usually is applied very loosely or perhaps in a different way than would be common in narrative analysis. Usually in FNaF, people use the word parallel to just mean similar or the same. And while similarities are of course important to something being considered a parallel,
I'll check that out later, did you, sir?
Narrative parallels, whether it be through similarities of characters, plots, themes, or symbolic imagery, are used to inform the audience about how two elements of a story relate to one another, usually through contrast or comparison. Usually in FNaF we're only focusing on character parallels, so let's stick with that for now. By giving two characters similar roles in the story, or having them endure similar things, we can often learn something about both characters by viewing how each handles their role differently.
What does Star Wars have
indeed
to do with
similarly.
this?
Having two young boys grow up on a desert planet, be skilled pilots from
What?
a young age, and have destiny thrust
For
upon
the
them
record,
by
I have never seen a single movie of Star Wars, so if I don't know anything about this, it's because I don't know anything about Star Wars. I've never seen a single movie.
literally the same mentor figure, isn't just a bunch of coincidental connections. They show us the similarities, but more importantly the differences, between Anakin and Luke Skywalker, where one falls to the dark side and the other...
I've heard of Anakin and Luke, because my brother was obsessed with Star Wars when he was younger, but
resists it. As a more FNaF-related example, in the Fazbear Fright story
Thank you.
Seek, we have
Thank
two
you.
characters, a bully older brother and a victim younger brother,
Yeah,
which
I've seen
at
the
first
story.
glance may indeed parallel Michael and Dave Afton, but we need to analyze the text further to understand whether or not this is an intended comparison by the writer or simply two unrelated characters falling into common archetypal roles. This is why most FNaF parallels discussions ultimately end in a big shrug, as most of the time story elements are just rehashed without much true intention to compare.
what does Unwithered Truth have to do with any of this?
Sometimes the comparisons are justified, like how we can arguably learn
Black and
a lot
white.
about Michael Afton from watching
Filter.
Vanessa Afton in the movie.
For
But
Doom
then
of
we
Doom.
reach all of the connections from David Murray to Dave
Yeah,
Afton.
yeah, 'cause
How
copyright
blatantly the story is
stuff, yeah,
reminding
I
us
get
not
it.
only of the bite victim himself, but the game he was introduced in. Then we connect that to Gregory and how he is constantly being linked to the crying child, and we have to wonder, if this is intentional, what is Scott trying to tell us? Because at this point, I don't
Why
think we
does this
can
feel like a freaking Mr. Hippo type freaking speech right
wave
now?
away the idea that all of these are just coincidences or miscommunications. Some
He's
people are
literally
screaming
doing the Mr. Hippo pose.
parallels from the rooftops, but are these parallels? Well, in some ways, yes. David Murray is a neglected boy with a soft toy plush who has an inventor father, which is similar to Dave Afton. But if these similarities are purely narrative and in no way literal in-universe connections, what are we supposed to learn about the boys through these comparisons? Some may argue that by evoking the bite victim through David or Gregory, we are supposed to import our sympathies for Dave Afton into the modern story. But that
I would like to remind you that this title, it never says it's collaborated with anyone. So, like, what the hell?
really work for Gregory,
He's
considering how
just
his
pulling up
similarities
these
are more
YouTubers for
visual
no
than
reason.
characteristic. And we're given plenty of reason in the text to feel bad for
Oh
David
my
Murray,
gosh.
so the link there is unnecessary, if that's the intention. Both Dave and David are seemingly being put back together by their parental figures, but again, that's a comparison, not a takeaway from comparison. Maybe we're still missing the pieces as to why this comparison is being drawn, but right now,
Why the
considering
tree?
supposed parallels
Why
are direct
the tree?
in-universe translations from one child to another, I think there's more to be gained by looking at the in-universe implications rather than just saying it's a storytelling technique and running away. So, in future, before you call something a parallel, consider if it's actually informing you about the story or characters, or if it's just repetitious writing. I've been the storyteller tree. No, not that one. Now back to T-Dreads.
Thank you, Unwithered Tree. I'm now
Oh,
feeling
Unwithered
better
Tree.
because I understand
What
that these
the hell am I
connections probably
watching?
mean something and aren't just supposed to be le cool. Anyways, now I gotta go to the survival logbook because there's actually even more stuff. The Crying Child actually gets some relevant dialogue of his own here. Through faded and altered text, we make out a conversation that gives us
Oh my
even more
God.
ties to David Murray, and later even to Gregory. Faded text asks Cece if his favorite toy was a plastic purple phone. This is a toy that we know were around for both David Murray and David Afton.
Yeah.
When you put this phone into moon.exe and use the item, I kid you not, a crying child picks up on the other end with the quote, "He never sees me." The faded text asks, "Do you remember your name?" A character with David Murray's appearance, struggling to remember their own name. Doesn't that sound familiar?
I'm Gregory.
He doesn't
yeah.
remember because he's been brainwashed to think that he's David for the last 5 months. God damn it!
Because Gregory seems to have trouble recalling his own name at the start of Security Breach, where we know he's probably just broken out of some weird mind control nonsense. Perhaps he's been being convinced that his name was something else. Side note on the topic of puzzle design, if all this is true, and the thing that he was breaking out of was some version of the Mimic AI attached to David Murray, it would make sense why Vanessa is named in her therapy tapes, but Gregory is not. Because at this time, he would be going by David and telling the therapist he was David. And saying that out loud would ruin the mystery.
You're telling me going through the unfinished files of the original game reveals who Gregory or the Crying Child really is? No way!
We're supposed to piece together later on. Do you have dreams is the next question with a drawing of Nightmare Fredbear. Guess what? The Crying Child responds to this, according to Hyperdroid, by saying, "I'm scared." And we know that the player of Moon.exe is scared to sleep ever again. Nightmare Fredbear, as Michael draws, is known to appear in a version of what later becomes of David Murray's room. Do any of these toys look familiar to you is the next question. And
Jackie and the purple telephone.
2 of the toys listed are a phone on one page and a Jack-in-the-Box on the other. Was your favorite ride the carousel is the next question. We know that David Afton, from what we see in FNaF 4, never rode a carousel, and he couldn't have ridden the FNaF 2 one because that game takes place after the bite.
For the interruption, my brother just called me. He asked for his freaking time while I was doing a freaking recording session. So, yeah. Now I'm going to block out his phone number thanks to him.
carousel in Murray's costume manner. If David Murray's memories were somehow intertwined with the crying child's, and how ridiculous would that be? It's not like we've seen another kid that looks like David have his memories in their head before. It would make sense that these sorts of overlaps are happening. Do you miss them? Is the next question. Underneath that question is an image of Foxy writing a note on a desk. Well, guess what? In Moon.exe, sure enough, there's a note on a desk begging the moon to bring back the sun, implying that the writer of that note misses the sun. Admittedly, Foxy works better as a Michael stand-in, but we can still use it for David, because Steelwood decided to throw a random piece of graffiti in Ruin that literally says, David, run Fox, run. The party was for you.
Oh, if you read it backwards, it does say David. Okay.
Final statement. And we know that there were parties for both David and the crying child on the day of their deaths. What the hell is going on? Cece looks like David, has the same personality traits as David, has similar relationships to David, has a possession that functions exactly the same as David's, is soothed by the same kinds of things as David, has memories that seem to fit better with David, lives on the same property as David, owns things that David owned, probably shares a name with David. What is happening? I have had people tell me that all of this, all the last, however many minutes you've been watching this video, all of those connections between Gregory, David, and Cece mean nothing. That Scott just set the game to end with a robot kid climbing out of a closet from FNaF 4 because it was cool. Scott knows about Gregbot.
I hear he solved a security breach.
Oh, he solves a lot of things.
I feel like he's solved security breach 3 or 4 times at this point.
And I'm so proud of him.
Thank goodness someone did, because let me tell you, that was not me. The man who did not solve security breach, this guy.
If he wanted to steer the fandom away from that course because it was completely wrong, he certainly could have done so. If he wanted to steer us away from that line of thinking, he shouldn't have set the game to end in the crying child's room. Now, admittedly, Gregory being another David is easier to swallow, because we know the Mimic story arc is
But what you're forgetting, T-Dreads, is that there are alternate endings.
Directly tied to the things we see in the security breach era. But what about the crying child? How could David's consciousness possibly be in him? And why? Well, to answer that, let me bring you back to something that's quite contentious at the moment. The books. John from FNaF, long before Secret of the Mimic ever released, made this connection.
The Silver Eyes trilogy were the first ever FNaF books to be released, and on a very basic level, the first book is about a group of friends who go and explore a mall that was built on top of an old Freddy's Pizzeria.
And here we go, another FNaF YouTuber being referenced.
Afton, aka Springtrap. That sounds just like what happens in Security Breach. We explore a mall
even though it's literally specified in the title of the video that there is no collaborations in this video. I can recheck if you want.
Tornado hit the town,
They
and the mall
literally
was now
says
destroyed.
nothing about
We learned that the
any
mall
of
was
these
set to be
being.
demolished, but because of the tornado,
But
the demolition was
what do
put
I
on
know?
pause. As I kept rereading this book, the connections to what we saw in Ruin kept piling up.
And given the plot of Secret of the Mimic, John was way more on point than he knew. In the fourth closet, the game that Secret of the Mimic would parallel if John's pattern recognition was correct, Henry, a genius inventor, suffers the loss of his child. Henry is then astounded when he's able to recreate her into a robot. However, eventually he feels that this possession is not what it seems, and so he beats the robot, pouring his agony into it. This is exactly what happens with Edwin and David. So we know that Scott is stealing this story structure from the fourth closet. Well, there's a very important part of that story structure.
Sorry, I'm slow. I had to think
William
for a
Afton is
second.
jealous that this genius inventor could create this spark of life. And so, Afton makes it his sole effort to find these rebuilt versions of Charlie and study them. to learn what's going on. Afton specifically states that his desire is to recreate that accident, and I believe that in a way, that's exactly what's happening in the game. Afton will find out that a genius inventor attempted to rebirth his child inside a machine. He'll be fascinated by the spark of life.
My name's Edwin.
So he moves into Edwin's house to study and learn how to recreate this incident. William Afton is studying and trying to recreate David Murray. This is why he's so similar to the crying child. It's by design. The only question left for me is in what way he's doing so. I see one of two ideas for this story arc going forward. The first idea is that Afton simply finds out about what happens to David after moving in, and is fascinated by what his possession was capable of, such as the Tiger Rock apparitions. Because of this, he wants to cause another child to produce the same abilities so he can further his studies. Under this interpretation, David Afton is not literally meant to have the consciousness of David Murray. It's just William forcing his son to live as similarly to David Murray as possible. This is why we have all those personality, life situation, and physical characteristics in common. My problem with this interpretation is that David Murray in the games, unlike Charlie in the novels, was not a perfect possession. It was incredibly flawed to the point where that by the time of Secret of the Mimic, M2 is barely recognizable as David. What I think is more likely here is that Afton, and likely Fiona, are trying to rebirth the actual David Murray's consciousness and give it a new vessel in the crying child. In this interpretation, rather than Afton going out of his way to recreate a possession that was unsuccessful, he's instead fixing and completing the broken possession. To me, this also fits better because we now know that one of the earliest motivations in this entire timeline is Fiona, desperate to recreate and fix her son. Fiona sends us to get Edwin. She needs a skilled technician to make use of these blueprints to fix her son. Edwin is gone, but lucky Fiona, because Afton, someone who clearly has the capability to build incredible things, is moving right into her house. And we also know that Afton knows about M2 already. They'll want to find each other. Now, I'm sure the thing that you're all hung up on is the consciousness swapping idea. Why do I think that's what's going on here? Well, we already know the Mimic plotline is tied to the help-wanted security breach era. And Vanny literally gets mind-swapped with a version of the Mimic that is pretty much explicitly told to us in the story. And because of this line from the trailer,
You will bring me what I want, and if you fail me, then you will. Both of you burn!
I think we're meant to assume that Gregory's got some mind swap action going on as well. Also, what we see
but
in
to
the
be
books,
honest, some things can change from what happens inside the trailer and what happens inside the final product. For example, within the Faz Watch, we could see some extra stuff within the Faz Watch, which we couldn't see in the actual game.
And him being out of character and the tapes and blah, blah, blah. Clearly, Gregory's not being himself. But I think people who have read the books and understand the plot structures and parallels do agree almost universally that Gregory has been being controlled and has broken out, and that's why he seems so confused. As for Cece, though, and to further cement the point, evidence for this consciousness swapping idea is practically everywhere you look in this series.
True.
I have a series of live streams on this channel where I look over all of Scott's Fazbear Fright stories, the plot outlines of which we know he writes himself. These stories have a few motifs that are overwhelmingly prevalent throughout them. One of these is something like what I called the addiction structure. Another example of a recurring
mind
plot structure for
swapping,
Scott, and one
body
that's more important to our
swapping
discussion today,
stuff in
is the
Five
story
Nights at
structure,
Freddy's.
where a human loses their identity or is swapped with another thing. Lonely Freddy features a Freddy doll asking a kid questions about himself to better take over his identity and swap
Again, To Be Beautiful as well, yeah.
bodies with him. Fazgoo is a creature that learns all it can about a
Fazgoo,
kid to swap
correct.
identities
I
with him
didn't even
and
think
become
about
him.
Fazgoo.
To Be Beautiful features a monster
I just
stealing
said
her
that, To Be
body
Beautiful.
become her In the week before, there's an ending where Phone Guy
Oh,
stares into
really?
the eyes of an animatronic, and they swap. In Into the Pit, Oswald's dad swaps with Spring Bonnie in a scene
Literally,
that
in the
nobody but
game
Oswald can see.
and in the
In
book.
Gumdrop Angel, the main character consumes a piece of the gummy candy and eventually becomes an exact replica of it, suffering the same fate. The Monty Within is all about two consciousnesses, one of which is an AI, being able to share the same brain. And in Help Wanted, a game, the main character's consciousness is literally trapped and swapped by the malevolent entity who is the Mimic AI. Scott uses this structure time and time and time and time again. And many of the stories I just listed take place in the pre-Pizzaplex era. Before the Pizzaplex era, there was still AI swapping and pretending to be kids in Scott's weird mind plotting brain. Writing off the possibility of Scott using this story structure in the games is completely ridiculous. Especially when now, unlike in the Gregbot days, we have an exact motive and several methods
For some reason, I thought I was going to say
for that to
redunculous.
happen.
Don't ask me why. I
For
don't know
Gregory,
why.
It's
My
100%
freaking brain.
the chip from the Vanny Mask and Balloon World. For Vanessa, it's 100% what we see happens in Help Wanted. Now for the hard part. The crying child. How the hell do Afton, Fiona, or both get David Murray's consciousness, or M2 at least, to attach to the crying child? Please understand that I don't have a complete answer for this exact question, and it probably won't get elaborated on until the DLC for Secret of the Mimic, but here we go! Does he still talk to you? What if the entity in this plush that we've long suspected is malevolent isn't Afton, who we see working in the back room, but rather has been Scott-conned into the version of the Mimic AI containing David Murray? That sounds ridiculous, but we do have a Spring Bonnie plush that serves this exact purpose.
Actually, that's a glitch trap plush. Okay.
Version of the Mimic AI resides in a plush of one of the two Fredbear's characters and tries to swap its mind with somebody it comes into contact with. And we know that Edwin developed a line of plushies with black, white dotted eyes that repeat phrases back to you. And the art
black,
described
white
as
dotted
your
eyes.
only friend. It would also
Those are
mean that a
literally
Freddy
like
doll
button
is
eyes.
asking a child things about his identity to steal his consciousness. Which would mean that Matt Pat's Lonely Freddy theory was right. Psychic friend Fredbear is just the game's version of a Lonely Freddy. Now, admittedly, that's the biggest stretch I've made so far, and like I said, I feel locked in on an answer for Gregory, and I'm certain Cece has gotta be involved, otherwise Scott wouldn't have thrown 20 references to him in the game, but I have no idea yet how exactly the crying child gets M2 attached to him. We'll have to wait for the future stuff. But to those who disagree so far, I offer a challenge. Let's say that unlike what many of my content creator buddies think, you don't simply think that all of these connections I've listed for the past 40 minutes are just to be cool, are just to be, oh hey, I remember the crying child. Cool that they're also named all the same. I'm so mad. Let's say you think these connections are intentional. And keep in mind the wise words of the unwithered tree. What do you think is a more likely direction?
What is the unwithered tree? What is that?
Deliberately calling our attention to connect David and Cece and Gregory in that order, and making them so similar as he is, and having the motif within Secret of the Mimic with, oh my goodness, the same situation is repeating 200 times. What do you think could possibly be a more likely story direction for Scott Cawthon to take based on his writing history than what I've listed here? Just a challenge to open up discussion. So, in conclusion, David Murray dies and William Afton is either inspired to recreate his exact circumstances of possession, thus forcing his son to live as closely to David Murray as he knows how, trying to recreate that spark of life, or Afton and Fiona are literally trying to recreate David Murray and give him a new, put back together body in the form of the crying child, and later Gregory. And that is God David. Also, by the way, this wasn't even all the connections we found. There's way more. The video would just be too long. Like, Rytoast finds that
Oh,
in
God.
the Curse of Dreadbear minigame, where you're operating on Dreadbear, you're in research and development. The only other time we see R&D is in this game. What are we doing as part of that minigame? We're setting Dreadbear, who pretty much everyone agrees represents the crying child, symbolically. We're setting his brain to a new frequency. And how about in FNaF World? A game that Scott has said is tied to canon events and is pretty much agreed upon by everyone to take place involving the crying child's mind. Well, funny that in the crying child's mind, in the carnival section, there's a giant metal owl with heterochromia, the exact thing that David is represented by in the story Tiger Rock. What a strange design to reuse for no reason. There's way, way more than what I talked about in this video, but I couldn't find a way to make it all fit. So make sure you like and subscribe now, because I'm going to bed.
Am I already subscribed? If not, I'll subscribe right now. But yeah, make sure to like this video, this reaction. Make sure to leave a make sure to like this reaction. Make sure to subscribe. And check out the original video. T-Dread's linker will be down in the description down below. And I'll see you guys next video and our live stream. Peace.